Big, very sad news. You've seen the headline. It's flashing across your screen right now. Anna Duggar looks unrecognizable. Shocking transformation. The clickbait is doing its job. It's pulling you in with that familiar, voyeuristic thrill. We see a grainy paparazzi photo, a woman caught in a private moment in a public space, and we think we know the story. We think it's about weight loss or a new hairstyle or the shadows under her eyes. We consume it, we comment on it, and we scroll on. But what if I told you, this isn't a story about a photograph? This isn't even just Anna Duggar's story. This single, haunting image, this rare family outing, is merely the tip of an iceberg. An iceberg made of faith, control, scandal, and a gilded cage constructed not from iron bars, but from doctrine, duty, and devastating betrayal. This is a story about what happens when the entire world watches a woman's life unravel in slow motion, and the unimaginable pressure that places on a human face, a human spirit. This is a deep dive into the machine that creates the moment captured in that clickbait headline. This is about the years, the decisions, the seismic shocks that lead to a face the world calls unrecognizable. Buckle up, because the story behind that shocking transformation is more complex, more tragic, and far more revealing about the world we live in than any tabloid caption could ever be. To understand the after, we must first understand the before. And the before for Anna Duggar wasn't just a point in time, it was an entire ecosystem. Imagine, if you will, a world where your path is predetermined. A world where courtship is a business transaction overseen by your father, where your first kiss is saved for your wedding day, and where your ultimate purpose, your divine calling, is to be a joyfully available wife and a prolific mother. Anna Keller entered this world. She wasn't born into the famous Duggar clan, but she was born into the same stringent belief system, the Institute in Basic Life Principles, or IBLP. Its teachings were her compass. Modesty meant skirts below the knee. Authority was never to be questioned, first her father's, then her husband's. Her heart was to be guarded, kept perfectly pure for the man chosen for her. And then, in 2006, that man was chosen. Joshua Duggar. The eldest son of the burgeoning reality TV empire, 19 kids and counting. He was handsome, seemingly pious, the heir apparent to the Duggar legacy. To the outside world, and likely to Anna, it was a fairy tale. A match made in heaven, literally. Their courtship was a public spectacle, chase side hugs, chaperone dates, the whole world watching this ideal play out. When she said yes, she wasn't just marrying a man. She was marrying into America's most famous conservative Christian family. She was signing up for a life under the spotlight where her every choice, her every pregnancy, her every expression would become public fodder. The wedding was televised. Their first kiss was televised. The birth of their first child, Mackenzie, was televised. Anna had achieved what her culture told her was the pinnacle of success. She was a Duggar. She was living the script. But behind the gingham curtains and the smiling family photos, the first cracks were already forming. In 2015, a seismic bomb detonated. It was revealed that Josh Duggar, as a teenager, had molested several underage girls, including some of his own sisters. The family's pristine image was shattered. The show was pulled from the air. The world watched, horrified, to see how the family and Anna would respond. And what did Anna do? She stood by her man. In a joint statement, she spoke of Josh's teenage mistakes and asked for forgiveness for him. She stood beside him at that infamous press conference where he called his actions inexcusable, but framed them within a narrative of repentance and spiritual recovery. To many on the outside, it was incomprehensible. Why would she stay? But within Anna's framework, this was the ultimate test of her faith and her vows. Her doctrine taught that her loyalty was to her husband and to the institution of marriage itself, ordained by God. Leaving was not an option presented on her moral menu. Her identity, her salvation, her very purpose were tied to being Josh's helpmeet, especially in his darkest hour. She doubled down on the script. The family managed to weather the storm. The show came back as Counting On, now focusing on the older children. Josh and Anna were sidelined, a shadowy presence off camera, but still part of the fold. They kept having children. Anna kept smiling in family photos. The machine, though damaged, kept churning. Then, 2021. The unthinkable. Federal agents raided a car dealership owned by Josh Duggar. The details that emerged were beyond anyone's worst nightmares. Josh was arrested and charged with receiving and possessing child sexual abuse material, some of the most horrific described in legal documents. This wasn't teenage mistakes. This was the adult, married father of Anna's 7 children, accused of unspeakable crimes. The trial was a media circus. Anna was there every single day, sitting in the front row, a silent, stoic monument. The evidence presented was graphic and overwhelming. The world's eyes weren't just on Josh, they were laser-focused on Anna's face, searching for a flinch, a tear, a crack in the facade. It became a morbid spectator sport. And through it all, she sat. She took notes. She brought him a sweater. When the guilty verdict was read, she closed her eyes. But she did not leave. This is the crucible. This is the fire. Imagine the cognitive dissonance required to sit in that room. Your husband, the father of your children, the man you were taught was your spiritual head, is being revealed as a monster. The evidence is irrefutable. The world is screaming at you to run. But your entire belief system, your community, your family's public brand, is built on absolute forgiveness, unwavering submission, and the condemnation of divorce. Where do you go? Who are you if you are not Mrs. Joshua Duggar? The man was sentenced to over 12 years in federal prison. And Anna was left. With 7 children. With a toxic, globally infamous name. With a family that, while offering support, is fundamentally bound to an ideology that prioritizes the restoration of the sinner over, many would argue, the safety and healing of the victims and the spouse. She became a prisoner of a different kind, a prisoner of legacy, of faith, of public opinion. Which finally brings us back to that photograph. That rare family outing. Let's dissect the moment, not as tabloid fodder, but as a forensic anthropologist of the soul. She is surrounded by her children, her beautiful, innocent children, who are the center of her world and her anchor to the man in prison. She is managing them, shepherding them, performing the one role she has left that is unambiguous: mother. But look closer. The posture. The clothes are often loose, concealing a uniform of modesty that now also feels like armor. The smile, if it's there, doesn't reach the eyes. The eyes tell the real story. They look weary. Not just tired from a long day weary, but a soul-deep exhaustion. A haunting. They carry the weight of public shame, private torment, unimaginable betrayal, and an uncertain future. Is she unrecognizable? Perhaps from the bright-eyed, 20-year-old bride beaming on her wedding day. But this face is painfully, tragically recognizable to anyone who has studied trauma. It's the face of a woman holding an impossible tension. The tension between love for her children and horror at their father's actions. The tension between deep-seated faith and the crushing weight of its practical application. The tension between her private grief and her very public life. Her transformation isn't about aging or stress in a vacuum. It's a geological change. The slow, grinding pressure of tectonic plates, of dogma, scandal, and survival has literally reshaped her countenance. The light that the reality TV cameras once found has been forced inward, just to keep the engine running. This is the face of a woman living in a perpetual state of crisis management with no exit strategy. But the story doesn't end with Anna's frozen moment in a parking lot. Because she's not the only character in this sprawling American saga. Her story forces us to look at the entire Duggar empire. Counting On is gone, cancelled in the wake of Josh's conviction. The family's platform has shrunk, but they persist online. The other sisters, Jill, Jessa, Jinger, Joy, they have all begun, in their own ways, to tell their stories. Memoirs, interviews, social media. Jill and her husband Derek have become vocal critics of the IBLP system and the family's control, speaking of being financially exploited and emotionally manipulated by the show's producers and her own parents. Jinger has written a book critiquing the performance-based faith of her upbringing. They are deconstructing, piece by piece, the very machine that built them. They are showing faces that are, in a different way, also unrecognizable from their 19 kids and counting personas, faces of women finding their own voices, however painfully. And what of Jim, Bob, and Michelle? The patriarch and matriarch? Their image as America's benign, quirky conservative parents lies in tatters. Their handling of the initial molestation scandal is now viewed through a lens of cover-up and spiritual manipulation. Their authority is being questioned, not just by the media, but by their own children. The unified front is crumbling. Every interview, every social media post from a Duggar child is now scrutinized for signs of allegiance or rebellion. This family is a microcosm of a much larger cultural war. They represent the extreme end of patriarchal, fundamentalist Christianity, but their themes, gender roles, parental authority, the scrutiny of reality TV, the trauma of secrecy, echo in less extreme ways across society. Watching the Duggars implode is like watching a controlled demolition of a very specific American dream. So, we return to Anna. While her sisters-in-law branch out, Anna seems to be burrowing in. Reports suggest she is living on a property owned by the Duggar family, supported by them. She visits Josh in prison. She posts Bible verses on social media, often about strength, perseverance, and God's plan. The comments on her posts are a war zone, a brutal mix of supporters praising her loyalty and forgiveness, and detractors condemning her for staying, for exposing her children to his influence, for being a doormat. This is her reality now. A life of isolated devotion under the microscope, waiting. For what? For Josh's release in 2032? For a spiritual revelation? For the children to grow up and ask their own hard questions? The psychological toll of this waiting game is incalculable. She is the keeper of a flame nobody else wants to touch, living in a purgatory of her own making and of a system's design. And the children. 7 young minds, growing up with a father in prison for unspeakable crimes, a mother under immense strain, and a last name that is internet shorthand for scandal. How will they process this legacy? Will they follow the path of their aunts toward questioning and independence? Or will they double down on the family faith, seeing their mother as a martyr and their father as a fallen saint to be redeemed? Their future is the next, and perhaps most important, chapter of this never-ending story. We started with a clickbait headline. Anna Duggar looks unrecognizable. But after peeling back the layers, we see that the real shock isn't her appearance. The real shock is the journey that led her there. The real shock is that her face is a living document, a map of trauma, faith, and resilience that we have all watched being drawn in real time. This isn't a story with a neat ending. It is a slow-burning American epic of faith, fame, and failure. It's a story about what women are asked to carry in the name of duty. It's a story about the dark underbelly of reality television and the families it consumes. It's a story about the limits of forgiveness and the cost of grace. Anna Duggar's story continues, one silent car ride, one managed public outing, one prison visit at a time. Her transformation is ongoing. And as long as there is public fascination, as long as the Duggar name stirs controversy, as long as there are cameras waiting to catch her in a rare, unguarded moment, the world will keep watching, searching her face for answers she may never give. We left off at the edge of purgatory, Anna Duggar, waiting. But to truly grasp the gravity of that weight, we must step inside the cage. Not a cage with visible bars, but one crafted from doctrine, family loyalty, and a distorted sense of divine purpose. We need to talk about the theological prison. Anna's decision to stay isn't merely a personal choice of stubborn loyalty. It is the logical, albeit extreme, endpoint of a specific theological framework. The Institute in Basic Life Principles, the IBLP, and its popularized homeschooling curriculum, the Advanced Training Institute, promoted a rigid chain of command they called the umbrella of authority. Picture it, God at the top, then husbands under God, then wives and children under the husband. To step out from under your umbrella, your father's, then your husband's, was to expose yourself not just to worldly harm, but to spiritual attack. For Anna, whose own father enthusiastically placed her under Josh's authority, leaving that covering would be an act of profound spiritual rebellion. This theology intertwines with the concept of grace and forgiveness in a way that can trap the victim. The narrative becomes, can you, as the wife, exhibit Christ-like forgiveness? Can you be the vessel for his redemption? Your unwavering love could be the key to saving his soul. The burden of a man's spiritual salvation is placed squarely on the shoulders of the woman he betrayed. Her endurance becomes a measure of her own holiness. And then, there's the ultimate trump card, the sanctity of the marriage covenant. In this worldview, it is nearly indissoluble. Adultery might be a biblical out, but even then, forgiveness and reconciliation are held as the superior path. Crimes like Josh's? They are framed as a form of adultery against the mind, or a manifestation of a sinful heart that needs healing, not a reason to dismantle the godly institution of marriage itself. Divorce would not just be a personal failure, it would be a public repudiation of everything Anna, her family, and the Duggars ever claimed to believe. So, when we look at Anna, sitting in that courtroom, we are not just looking at a wife standing by her man. We are looking at a theological soldier holding the line. To flee would be to admit that the entire system, the system that defined her parents' life, her upbringing, her courtship, her purpose, was flawed. It would be a cataclysm of identity. For her, staying might be a tragedy, but leaving would be an apocalypse. But theology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is enforced by community. Anna's community is the Duggar family itself, a powerhouse brand now fighting for its survival. Think of the financial and reputational stakes. After the first scandal, they managed a comeback. After the second, far more devastating one, the brand is critically wounded. Counting On is dead. Their public influence has dwindled. Within this damaged fortress, Anna serves a complex purpose. Publicly, her steadfastness is a powerful, silent testimony to the family's core message of radical forgiveness and family loyalty. She is living proof that their system works under even the most extreme pressure. Privately, her situation is a monumental crisis to be managed. Ensuring she and the 7 children are cared for, housed, fed, financially supported is a practical necessity, but it also creates a profound dependency. The support comes with unspoken strings, continuity, silence, adherence to the family narrative. Where could she even go? Back to her parents, who endorsed this marriage. Into the secular world, which she was taught to fear and which sees her as either a victim or a fool. She has no college education, no secular work experience, no independent financial resources. The practical cage is as real as the theological one. The family property she lives on is both a refuge and the walls of her keep. Now, let's contrast this with the quiet revolution happening just outside her walls. Look at her sisters-in-law. Their journeys are creating a seismic rift in the Duggar universe, and their paths illuminate the roads Anna did not, or could not, take. Take Jill Dillard. Once the dutiful daughter who helped raise her siblings, Jill's journey has been a public and painful extraction. She and her husband Derek have spoken openly about being under a crushing, unfair contract for the show, never being paid for their years of labor as children and adults. They've revealed that going to therapy, a practice often stigmatized in their circles as suggesting a lack of faith, was crucial. Jill has used the word cult-like to describe aspects of her upbringing. She's gotten a nose ring, worn pants, had a beer. These are monumental acts of rebellion in her context. Her face, too, has transformed, but into one of someone grappling with hard truths, finding her voice, often with visible pain, but also a growing defiance. Then there's Jinger. Her transformation seems more theological than stylistic. Her book, Becoming Free Indeed, is a careful but firm critique of the performance-based faith and man-made rules of the IBLP system. She talks about fear-based teachings and legalism. While still deeply religious, she and her husband have moved to Los Angeles, a world away from Arkansas, both physically and culturally. She's disentangling her faith from the specific controls of her childhood. Jessa and Joanna Forsyth present more complicated pictures. They appear to remain closer to the family's core beliefs, defending their parents at times, yet even they show subtle shifts, different styles of parenting, slightly more openness. They exist in a tense middle ground. These women are navigating their own umbrellas of authority, transferring it from their father to their husbands, but with husbands who seem to be allowing or encouraging a slightly more modern, if still conservative, worldview. They are proof that change is possible within the framework of marriage, but it requires a husband who is an ally in deconstruction, not the source of the trauma. For Anna, this revolution next door must be a source of profound confusion and perhaps isolation. Her sisters are finding varying degrees of freedom, while her own umbrella is in federal prison. Their journeys might offer a glimpse of an alternative, but they also highlight how uniquely trapped she is. Her headship is absent, yet his authority, cemented by their beliefs and the legal bond, remains. She is a general without an army, yet expected to hold the fort indefinitely. And at the center of it all, the children. Mackenzie, Michael, Marcus, Meredith, Mason, Mariella, and the newest, Madison, born just after her father's arrest. 7 lives shaped by this chaos from their very first breaths. What is their daily reality? Homeschooled, likely with curricula emphasizing the same IBLP principles. Surrounded by a large, loving, but deeply ideological extended family. Their mother is their sole, constant parent, a mother bearing a weight they can sense, but cannot fully understand. And then there's the elephant in the room, their father. How's he explained? In a system that venerates fathers as spiritual leaders, how do you reconcile that with a father in prison for crimes against children? The language used will be critical. He will likely be framed as having sinned, as having made terrible choices, and as needing prayer and forgiveness. The focus will be on his spiritual status, not on the profound harm of his actions. The children will be taught to pray for Daddy's heart. Visits to the prison will be normalized as acts of familial duty and Christian love. The psychological tightrope Anna must walk is agonizing. She must maintain an image of Josh as a repentant sinner to preserve the children's relationship with their father and the family's theological cohesion, while somehow protecting them from the full, horrifying truth of his crimes. She must instill in them the values of their faith, while the prime example of its failure sits in a federal penitentiary. The long-term impact on these children is the greatest unknown of this entire saga. Will the dissonance become too great as they grow older and inevitably access the internet? Will they become defenders of the faith, or will they become its most damning critics? They're the true second act of this story, and their journey is just beginning. All of this, Anna's struggle, the sisters' deconstruction, the children's future, plays out under the unblinking eye of the public. This is the final, inescapable layer of the cage, the legacy of reality TV. The Duggars didn't just live their lives, they commodified them. They sold a narrative of wholesome, quirky, ultra-conservative life. The audience bought it. We were complicit. We watched the courtships, the weddings, the births, feeling a mix of fascination and judgment. We created the market for their brand. When the scandals hit, the relationship turned predatory. Anna isn't just a woman dealing with tragedy. She is a character in an ongoing, real-life drama that the public feels entitled to. Every paparazzi shot, every social media post, is dissected. The unrecognizable photo is the product we now demand, proof of the fallout, visual evidence of the consequences of the scandal we consumed. This creates a horrific feedback loop. Her trauma is magnified by the spotlight. Her every choice is criticized by millions of armchair theologians and psychologists. The pressure to perform the right kind of grief, the right kind of faith, is immense. She can't simply fall apart. She must fall apart in a way that is deemed acceptable by either her fundamentalist community or the secular public, both with diametrically opposed expectations. The Duggars taught us that every private moment could be public. Now, they are learning the irreversible cost of that lesson. Anna's face in those rare outings isn't just showing the strain of her life, it's showing the strain of being watched living it. So, we look to the future. A future measured in years of a prison sentence. What does the next decade look like for Anna Duggar? Year by year, it will be a life of routine centered on survival and maintenance. Homeschooling 7 children across a wide age range. Managing a household. Regular, monitored phone calls with Josh. Carefully choreographed prison visits, where conversations are superficial, children are presented, and the dark reality is stuffed down.